and welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore 40K, a lore podcast in which we aim to separate our Drukhari from our Dark Angels, our Tyranids from our Tau, and our Craft Worlds from our Chaos Marines, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer 40K stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber, and I know pretty much fuck all about 40K. With me is my co-host, Christopher Crowlin Allen.
Hello there.
Who knows absolutely fuck all about 40K.
Very, very true.
And my dear brother Darren.
Hello.
Who knows so much about 40k, it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. Over the years, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address that ignorance.
Hooray!
Alright, attempt 74. Let's see if we can get this shit show started.
This time with feeling, guys. This time with feeling.
This episode has had more reboots than 40k.
Hey! Boom!
Bam.
What is cracking?
What is cracking, man? I've been waiting, holding my breath for this recording, guys. And about you?
Because you were so riveted by Edition Gate last episode.
Oh boy.
Was I ever?
Like, Jesus, so much. I absorbed so much information. I forgot my own phone number. Like,
I could actually see the side of your head swelling as it was just this like
that and the nosebleed. I think it was time just to wrap it up, wasn't it? It was like Chris is about to fucking error 404 on us.
Yeah,
Just you did look a bit like that meme of all the math symbols flashing up in front of your face.
Ben, why does everything sound like running water?
Right. Well, I think based on that, I mean, we, Kral and I, have made a pretty shoddy attempt at a recap last month, so I'm not willing to try it again. Dhar, I think you should take the lead. Give us a quiz.
Yeah. Last time it was the blind leading the blind. So yeah, come on.
Okay, what edition had the most codices, the most army books?
Kral, I'm going to let you go first, and if you get it right, you get the point.
That is how quizzes work. Yes. If
But like, I won't even answer. I won't even answer because I feel like
let's put one in each. I'm going to say 3. Fuck it. 3. Ben?
3. I'm going to say 2.
Chris was the closest because 3rd edition had 19 codices. It's actually 9th edition. They're now looking at 22 or 23, depending on when this episode goes out.
Nice.
Is that 22 in addition to the codices that already exist, or did they revamp existing codices and then add on that as well?
The model that they go is with each new edition, there are going to be either small rules changes or kind of systemic rules changes. Regardless, each faction requires a new codex because that's the vehicle for which they sell the miniatures. So it's
that's quite a actual workload, isn't it?
Yeah, the game is kind of an intellectual exercise in marketing. That it happens to be a game is good for everyone, but they use it to push out new models. In addition to having a number of codices, which may have been the second.
What? Was it the second?
In addition to having the second largest number of codices, what is also special about 3rd edition?
No idea. What was special about the 3rd edition?
Oh no, I don't know either. I was just wondering if you knew. It saw the introduction of the Force Org, the Force Organizational Chart, where you had a set number of leaders, elite troops, fast attack units, and heavy support. So it was through a framework around the game, which before was pretty much whatever miniatures you have in your collection you can put on on the table.
Right.
Which somewhat
Yeah,
ironically is now what at the end of 9th edition, that's again what you can do. There are so many variations in the Force org that you can bring an entire force of elite troops and some leaders and kind of tip the balance of the game in your favor. The issue is that people tend to rely too much on the points values of units to get a balanced game.
So could you have like one army made up of like really low level miniatures, so very low point cost miniatures, but a huge army, like a lot of,
yes,
very numerous,
yeah.
versus then a small group of like elites, but they'd
Yes.
be evenly matched on points. Is that
Yes.
the idea?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
Okay.
I mean, the difficulty there is what you've got to try and understand about miniatures is it's what weapons they have. There are some, there's good beneficial abilities and special rules, but it's really what weapons they're bringing to bear on the enemy. So if you can get 40 Hormagaunts with effectively sword fists attacking a unit of 20 Imperial Guards with their lasguns. The lasguns aren't going to make that much of a difference, even at range, and especially not in close quarters, because as soon as you get into combat, you're just going to mince them. So
yeah, that's what I thought, Darren. Yeah.
Well, no, I remember you talking about it before the record started. Yeah.
I think your nose is bleeding, mate.
Question for you: if as an absolute noob, never played the tabletop, what faction would you say is a good faction for me to start? If I was like, right, I'm going to spunk a load of money now on an army to get into the tabletop gaming, what faction and what units would you suggest is a good start?
If you are going to spunk a lot of money in it, I would suggest a Slaneshi army, because that's the god of 70 times. No, sorry.
Spunky.
It really depends on, like, what do you want to be able to do? Do you want to be able to be stealthy? Do you want to be able to do kind of clever tactical flanking maneuvers with kind of long-lasting troops? Or do you want to wade in with mass units? Or do you want to have a significant number of large units?
Oh, I guess I'm asking you the same thing. What would you suggest as someone who's never played it? What do you think would be a good, accessible starting army for me? Easy to use, that has fun, and would encourage me to play more.
And that you can loot with. You love
and
loot.
You can loot with. You got to have loot. You got to have loads and loads and loads and loads of loot.
I mean, the kind of dull, prosaic answer is just buy the starter set for a given edition. And it's good if you can get these, if there's a couple of you buying, because what you'll do is you and a mate can get a starter set each, and then you can swap out one of the forces, because there'll be 2 forces in the starter set. So you'll get double of your faction for the same price, if you see what I mean. And you'll have all the various other bits and bobs. But it's really, I mean, the archetypal one is Space Marines. That's the one where a lot of people start, because they're the ones that feature in the starter sets most often. I mean, if you're wanting to spend only a couple of £100 for a low model count, hard-hitting army, you go with the Custodes, which are the Emperor's bodyguards. If you want to go for a mass rank army of like xenomorphs from the aliens, you go with Space Skaven or Tyranids. You go with the Tyranids because you'll just have tons of miniatures. But the same then is true of but then you can kind of the middle ground. Then you're looking at Eldar, you're looking at Imperial Guard. They've got the tank regiments, that kind of idea.
Yeah.
And it depends then on what kind of level of technology do you want them to have. Do you want them to be like basic Johnnies, or do you want them to be advanced? Or somewhere in between?
You're more of a kind of orc guy.
It's like a dim sum restaurant. You just tick the attributes you want. I want green with sneakiness and a couple of servings of flanky.
In that case, you want the Blood Axe Orc tribe, because they are sneaky and green and have access to a couple of nice units as well.
That's me then.
It was one of those like online digital kind of checklists. The moment that you select green, it really limits the rest of the other options, doesn't it? It's like
it's
your
either
orcs. Oh yeah, dark
orcs
angels.
or dark angels or the Death Guard, who are Nurgle's troops. These phrases are all meaningless to most new listeners, but don't worry, we'll get to them eventually.
We'll get there. On that point, should we get into the lore? What
Shall
are
we?
we covering this month?
Oh God, yeah, we're not just doing a quiz.
That you were totally prepared for,
and it was going so well. So we've had episode 1. We had a kind of general overview. Episode 2 and 3. This is mostly for Kral because I think he blacked out. We had a very, very high level and quick summary of the 9 editions of 40K that have existed, and describing which factions came into the game at what edition. So I thought we'd just we would take a break from that and enter what I think would be kind of a normal episode moving forward, where it's lore based. It's not edition or game based. So I thought we'd start with the setting as a whole, which is the galaxy, the Milky Way. Which is the galaxy that 40K happens in.
Do they call it the Milky Way in 40K?
No, they call it Gerald.
I mean, that's a significantly more 40K name than the Milky Way.
Yeah, it does sound a little bit squishy, doesn't it? And a little bit nicey nice.
But what's ironic is the image they have for Gerald. It's the Milky Bar Kid.
No, do they have a name for the galaxy? Do they just call it the galaxy?
It's just the galaxy, yeah.
It's just the galaxy, right?
Okay. Galaxy.
What, as I've alluded to by calling it what it is our galaxy. It is the Milky Way, A.K.A Gerald. And if you're looking effectively at the kind of four-arm spiral with the kind of galactic core in the middle, and then 4 arms coming off. And we're on the leftmost arm. The planet Earth is on the leftmost arm. As we alluded to in episode 1, there is this kind of hellish alternate dimension called the warp. Now, the warp is where the chaos gods live. It's the kind of evil... Oh, what's the name of that movie? Event Horizon. Have you seen Event Horizon? Yeah. It's it's the hellscape within the Event Horizon, or the kind of home of the Cenobites from Hellraiser. So it's an area of utter chaotic potentiality and souls. It's referred to sometimes as the Sea of Souls, because all living things, when they're born, that have a soul, comes from the warp. And there are beings in there known as warp entities, aka demons and chaos gods, and other monsters in there. So that, if you can imagine, the plane of reality kind of sits within and on top of and underneath and slightly to the left of the warp. So they occupy the same space.
Why does the warp have to be so shit? Why can't it be a nice place?
Effectively, it's a place of pure emotion. And the strongest emotions, ignore the propaganda that Disney gives, the strongest emotions are the negative emotions. And these have coalesced. So souls that have been riddled with a particular emotion are attracted to others that have the same emotion. So you effectively have an area of extreme emotion. So it's the evil version of all the douchebags that you meet at parties. All of them.
Got it.
In the warp.
Yeah.
It's not a pejorative. I'm not being discriminatory, because I myself was one of those douchebags. So
and still are occasionally.
Oh, very nice to meet you, fellow douchebag.
Oh, yeah. Good to meet you too. It usually takes a couple of bottles of Baileys, though, doesn't it?
A couple? Actually, yeah, a couple. As listeners will not be aware, I have addiction is a very... No, it's an addiction.
It's an obsession.
To
a healthy obsession.
An obsession with Baileys. And Vic, my other half, just mentioned, just idly, she was literally just looking wistfully out the window and said, God, imagine how big you'd be if there was Bailey's cream cheese.
Thought of the day with Vic.
And I thought to myself, Jesus, I thought our relationship was really strong.
So saying that the warp is basically just uber emotions. It's an emotional kind of place, and most of the strongest emotions are negative emotions. In the warp, then, are there, even if it's to a smaller degree, positive emotions, love, happiness, hope?
Yes.
Okay.
Next question.
Right, fine. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. But these are, these will exist in little kind of slunk away pockets.
They get pushed around and bullied by the other bigger emotions. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Or devoured by the sentiences. So what you have to imagine is, as more of these kind of negatively imbued souls coalesce, they gain a level of sentience and are thus able to kind of act independently rather than just being a big bag of souls.
Your big bag of souls? Yeah, sure.
Okay. Said in a New York accent.
Yeah, big bag of souls, you Jake. I'm walking here. Bubbity boobity.
Why the warp is important within 40K? It really two major aspects. One is travel. It's if you dip into the warp at one area, when you come out, you can be tens of thousands of light years away, and it's taken you an hour or a month or a year, rather than sublight travel. It's just kind of beavering along. Is that a phrase? Beavering along?
Yeah,
it is now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because as I remember, you can travel through the warp, but it's not guaranteed at what time it will take for you to arrive at your destination. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you ever arrive in the past?
Literally just about to say there has been a couple of cases where a ship has arrived before it left.
Wow. Can you imagine? Like, I'm just going to the shops. I'll be back in a minute. And you arrive just before the conversation. What do you want from the shops? Wait, hold on. You just left. I already told you. It's a fucking Maltesers, man. Get it done.
It is that people arriving before they had left. Is that very rare? Is that an exception rather than the rule, though?
Oh, yeah. Within the lore, I think there's an Inquisitor called Ravenor that happened to him, although I can't recall exactly if it was ship-based travel or did he just get psychically kind of teed off back into the past. But yeah, the eddies and tides of time within the warp are unstable. Now, because you need a kind of a set point to be able to navigate properly from wherever you are within 3 dimensions, that was why the Astronomicon, which is this large spherical construction built into the Himalayas on Earth, staffed, I wouldn't say staffed,
fueled.
Really, they're more like light bulbs. So you've got psychers just plugged into the inside of this dome or inside of this sphere, and they focus the Emperor's will and act as a lighthouse. I actually made someone quite upset once by saying that the Emperor effectively is a broken GPS unit. That's effectively what he is in terms of the Astronomicon and guidance through the warp.
Why did they get upset about that?
Yeah, and who were they?
It was
the Emperor.
Internet. It was the It was an internet person who
I
seemed to
see.
think that the Emperor was just the bee's knees.
Right.
Anyway, the
It was the Emperor.
do you remember me earlier saying I used to be a douchebag? Do you remember that?
When you said used to be,
Used to be like yesterday.
yes,
This happened yesterday.
Okay.
No,
But today I'm great.
I'm absolutely fine. I have love in my heart for everyone. People that use the Astronomicon, the signal, are, well, it's the Imperial Navy and anyone who really owns a significantly sized ship, but they have to use someone called a navigator. Now, this is where we get into, this is pulled straight out of the Dune works by Frank Herbert kind of characters and concepts. So these are mutants that can see the signal of the Astronomicon, and every kind of warp-capable craft of the Imperium has one.
Never leave home without him.
But so, yes, guiding us back to the warp, the primary use is the travel. It allows for expansion.
When you say that they're mutants, I think you mentioned that they had a literal third eye, didn't they?
They have yes.
Is that the only mutation that they have? Or why are they considered mutants?
Because they have a third eye, mate.
Okay. Wait, that's not normal? Oh, gonna have to speak to the doctor about his third nipple. I hoped it was going to help me travel space, but apparently not.
Yeah, only as part of a circus, mate. Yeah, it's their only real physical mutation is this third eye in the middle of the forehead, but they have psychic abilities as well, and that is the second greatest kind of facet of the warp. It's where psychic powers come from. Now, people new to the lore, psychic powers are magic. It's space magic. That's effectively what it is.
Yeah.
No, we can't use those words.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah.
But yes, so it's the source of all psychic power in this kind of universe. So it comes from some people are born with the capacity to see and channel warp energy, and these then are what's called psychers.
Psychers.
Yeah, we talked about how the Imperium devours its own psychers to keep itself operational in terms of the Astronomicon, in terms of feeding them to the Emperor, and in terms of conditioning psychers to be communication systems and weapons to keep the Imperium of Man going. So yes, as Kral pointed out, the Imperium is not a good thing. It just is. And objectively, it's a totalitarian system of managing humans across a galaxy.
Just the name suggests they're a bunch of dicks. I bet they talk about themselves in third person as well. You know what I mean? Really, yeah, like narcissistic. We are the Imperium of Man, and so on.
Yeah.
Well, Kral, Ben doesn't agree with you on that one.
So the warp occupies a similar place as physical reality. It allows for speedy travel, although dangerous, and it allows for the kind of condition of magic within the 40K universe, equally as dangerous. Mr. Chris?
I'm just trying to get my head around. So you can travel light years potentially very quickly, and there lies a problem. What use is that kind of space travel when you can't guarantee when you're going to arrive? In what situation is it useful?
It allows for a more rapid expansion of the frontier of influence throughout the galaxy, and then operationally it provides logistics that doesn't take generations to reach systems. I mean, the cases of ships disappearing, it's rare. The cases of things arriving late, not uncommon, but in general, there are safe passages through warp space, referred to as warp routes.
Right. Okay.
But you're still at the whims of the kind of powerful entities of the warp that can kind of knock a ship a couple of weeks or a couple of years out of whack. But before the discovery of the warp and the kind of advent of warp travel, you're looking at sending out, there weren't really battleships as such. There were arcs, there were generational ships where it would be thousands of years before they arrived at their destination, rather than at worst 100 years.
And just very last question on that. Was warp travel always inherently part of Warhammer since day dot, or did that get introduced in second editions later on in the lore? And pre that, people were just snail mail, as it were. They were just crawling through space.
You have a kind of odd amalgam of them. The warp existed, although it wasn't as clearly defined as it came to be later in two books called The Realms of Chaos. But you then had system ships dealing within one solar system that could operate and didn't need to use the warp.
The warp routes that you mentioned, if they would obviously have to be established through, I guess, a trial and error period.
Yes.
So was the number of ships lost to warp travel higher in the past than it is nowadays, or say current day in 40K with those warp routes in place?
100%, yes.
Right.
With early warp travel, this is where you get the advent of kind of what's referred to as the rogue traders. These are the kind of chartist captains, the kind of traveling merchants, the Marco Polos of space.
Nice.
And they would go off expanding the kind of knowledge and influence of the Imperium, but also mapping things as they go.
Wow.
So you find that there are constantly instances of in the various RPGs of characters coming across a derelict spaceship from 10,000 years ago,
right,
or a spaceship that has crashed onto a planet and now a city has been built around it. This kind of idea.
That's really
cool. Yeah, so you are coming across what's called archaeotech, which is archaeological technology.
Right.
So we're still talking, say for instance, you found a thing that's 15,000 years old in present day 40K. That's still 25,000 years in the future, or 23,000 years in the future, from where we are now.
Right.
So
Kral, you're bleeding from your nose again, mate.
But wait, in the future, past tense. Yeah, okay, fine.
So the ships that they have, what's the fastest that they can travel not in the warp? I'm assuming that they don't have light speed travel.
No, not at all. So yes, so it's all sublight. So I mean, the smaller crafts with larger engines, say we're talking naval, so we're talking like frigates and destroyers, they'll be the fastest ships. You still are moving at a mass through space.
Right.
You're still bound by kind of
the laws of physics.
Call it velocity, laws of physics within most systems.
Right.
But no, in terms of, there's no light travel, there's no kind of light speed travel out. In fact, even with the warp, you're not actually traveling, you're still traveling sub-light, but you're dipping in and out of kind of shortcuts.
Yes, yeah. It's like actually to reference that film again, Event Horizon. Isn't there a scene in that where he explains it by taking a bit of paper and drawing two dots, and he's like, the fastest point between them is a straight line, unless you fold the paper together and then you just pass. Yeah. He punches a pencil through the two holes, so it is like it's a wormhole, really, isn't it? Yeah. Sweet. And so concludes my physics lesson of the day.
And I'm spent.
Tune in tomorrow when I'll be using the same bit of paper to make an origami spaceship.
So effectively, in a nutshell, that's the warp. That's what the warp is used for functionally by the Imperium of Man. So we're going to spend the next few episodes focused on the Imperium of Man and how it kind of operates within the universe. The galaxy. I should say that there's a kind of third level of reality, which is the web way. which is strongly associated with the Eldar. These are space elves in their various kind of flavors. So the kind of Greco-Roman Atlantean elves, the Cenobite elves, and the kind of happy-go-lucky Harlequin performing elves.
Yeah,
Space jesters. That's right.
They do a lot of tumbling.
That's what we call them.
Yeah.
A lot.
And juggling on unicycles.
Yeah, a lot of glass walls.
Yeah.
A lot of glass. Did you just say they juggle unicycles?
Juggling on unicycles.
Chris has never been to a circus before. That's not how it works, man.
I just love the idea of a weaponized unicycle. But these are true kind of stable wormholes through the warp. So it's constructed by who knows, and it allows for yes, it was the old ones. Why am I saying who knows? We covered it in episode 1. What am I doing with my life? So it's the old ones have created this passage through the warp that's safe and secure, or was safe and secure, but is now fractured. And so there are races and civilizations that exist within the webway, and it also allows for almost instantaneous travel throughout the galaxy, depending on which webway gate.
And regulated, stable travel as well.
In terms of the amount of time it takes to go from A to B using the webway, yes.
Okay.
It's no longer safe. The webway is no longer complete. It was fractured. And so you do encounter baddies in there.
Would our perception of the webway be as our perception is normally? Do you know what I mean? Like, what does it look like?
In most of the imagery, and really a lot of the kind of visuals for it were set out in the kind of the Horus Heresy card game made by Sabretooth Games. You have like a golden shimmery tunnel, but these are tunnels that have cities in them. Whole cities have been built within these enormous kind of tunnels and caverns, but it's a kind of golden heavenly light, a kind of warm. I was going to say a warm hole, but you know what I mean. It's just the it's perceived as a kind of a series of golden tunnels.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Chris.
Was the webway gifted to the Eldar by the old ones, or was it commandeered by the Eldar? Did they come across it and just thought, "Oh, we'll use this"?
Oh, I love that.
It was really kind of suborned by the Eldar. The Eldar took it over after the old ones went away.
Thank you for explaining what suborned means. I didn't know what that meant. Yeah.
I totally didn't either. I was like, he's got to shed some light on that.
They knew it existed and it was used by the old ones, but they kind of elected to populate it and take it over and use it as a basis for travel and expansion of their own empire. So very much
squatters' rights. Got it. Yeah.
Oh, I've forgotten the name. The in the Mass Effect game, it's the big gates that you can fire yourself across the galaxy.
Oh yeah.
The space catapult.
Space catapult.
The space trebuchet.
Flying.
So it's an adoption of an older civilization's technology, effectively. So those are really the kind of 3 realities that exist at one time, but they all occupy the same space. Returning to our own real world and the Imperium of Man, this is centered on our own world, on Terra as it's known. So all distances really are measured from the small little planet that's on the kind of leftmost arm of the Milky Way galaxy. And the Imperium then divides the galaxy into 5 kind of sections, or segmenta as they're referred to. So we have the segmenta solar, which is a vast amount of space centered around Earth, centered around Terra, and that's really the kind of home turf of the Imperium. So you're looking at vast amounts of fleets, innumerable regiments of troops, space marines, kind of protectorates, homeworlds. But it also denotes the kind of largest expansion of the human race pre-discovery of the warp. So that segmentum solar, that little kind of central enclave of humanity, is where they had gotten to before the advent of warp travel.
So is that then, obviously, that area must be limited by the speed of their ships, like we were mentioning before. Like, they couldn't have got very far.
Yes.
I'm guessing that it has a number of stars within it. It's a big enough area. It's not just the solar system, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. No, it's significantly larger than the solar system. You're looking at, somewhere between 80 and 100 light years in all directions.
Wow.
But centered around our solar system.
Centered around our solar system. You're looking at hundreds of systems, perhaps thousands of habitable planets. The accepted reality of the size of the Imperium in the lore, it's that there is 1 million habitable worlds. Or sorry, there are 1 million worlds within the Imperium.
Right.
So if you can imagine 1 million of any city existing spread across a huge area, imagine the logistics of trying to manage that. Not insignificant.
I can't even manage us. Like a million worlds is insane.
I mean, you've got to also take into account that the average population is somewhere in the tens of billions.
Per planet.
Each place as well.
Across the whole of the Imperium, the average is tens of billions. I mean, there are planets that have hundreds of billions of people on it, but there are also planets that have 500,000, and we'll cover some of those as we go on. But
planet laying down the lore only has 3.
Mm-hmm.
What? Edinburgh, London, and Cambridge. Yeah.
Yeah, the hive city.
So the segmentum, these are really kind of administrative areas. So we've got the segmentum solar, which is the heart of the Imperium. It's centered on Terra, just off to the left of the galactic core. North of that, then, you've got the segmentum obscurus. So this is really the hotbed of chaos and evil in the Imperium. It's where you've got something called the Eye of Terror, which is an area of space that has melded with the warp.
Is that terror as in TERROR, not terra?
Yeah. Amusingly, both of those phrases existed in the lore at the same time. The Eye of Terra was the symbol of the Emperor and the symbol of the War Master Horus, as Terra looking forward to take control and manifest the destiny of galactic conquest.
Terra with an A.
Terra with an A. The Eye of the planet Terra. But the Eye of Terror is an area of space. Yeah, terror, where the warp has breached through. It's not the only place that this has happened, but
you have the elbow of terror, the toenail of terror,
and it's completely different to the Eye of Terrier,
which is just this ironically gargantuan tiny dog running around space,
which is also not the same as Terry's eye.
Terry's eye. You have the chocolate orange of terror.
You have the chocolate terrier of terror. You have head, shoulders, knees, and toes of terror.
So we will cover some of these aspects as we move forward, but the important thing to kind of keep in mind is that the Eye of Terror are where the kind of forces of chaos in general exist. That's their kind of home section. It is also where it used to be the home empire of the Eldar. And there was an event there that caused the warp just to break through and kill effectively 98 out of every 100 Eldar was drawn into the warp. And that event is referred to as the Fall of the Eldar. And that is an important event, really, for two main reasons, neither of which we're going to cover now. Moving on. They
left the warp tap on, didn't they? They left the warp tap running. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, but I would encourage people to keep the Fall of the Eldar as a thing in their head when we move forward. To the east of this Segmentum Solar, we have the Ultima Segmentum. This really is the largest segmenta within the Imperium, and it covers really from the boundary of the Segmentum Solar all the way out to the opposite edge of the galaxy. So it covers a significant portion of the galactic core and then effectively the rest of the galaxy. You could fit all 4 of the other segmenta within the Ultima Segmentum. Now, this is the one where you're looking at constant conflict all the time, 24/7, perhaps 24/8 if you're using the warp, and almost every race that humanity encounters is found within the Ultima Segmentum. There is a minor warp storm there called the Maelstrom, and that's important because it was the site of the first Space Marine Civil War recorded within 40K lore in terms of published. The biggest one, and the one that predates everything else, is the Horus Heresy, and we'll cover that in a few episodes' time. But the Badab War was the first kind of published conflict between Space Marine chapters, Space Marine armies.
And when was that where was that in the timeline?
In the timeline, that is about 500 years ago. But the Horus Heresy was over 10,000 years ago. Gotcha. The other kind of important areas in there, really there's only kind of one. You're looking at Ultramar, which is the homeworld of the Ultramarines, hence Ultima Segmentum. It is where the kind of 500 worlds of Ultramar existed. This was a pseudo second Imperium of Man set up on the far side of the galactic core, where the Ultramarines kind of governed as these planetary leaders and sector leaders, kind of securing peaceful domination for the human race. Now, this was devastated during the Horus Heresy, an event, as I say, we'll cover, but it's the kind of second largest concentration of cohesive human power in Imperium history, outside of the relative security of the Segmentum Solar.
So is that rebuilt since its destruction during the heresy?
Yes, but not with the same efficacy. It's not as efficient a system as it used to be. So with 40K, the important thing to keep in mind is it's a high technology decayed into misunderstanding. So that's really what's going on across the Imperium. All of these segmentum are kind of at the edges, are bounded by mysterious regions. So in the Ultima Segmentum, it's the Eastern Fringe. So that's the boundary of Imperial control. So you do have rogue traders and armies and fleets go off into these areas, but a few of them return. It's so dangerous out there, either because the laws of physics are screwed up, because there's uncharted warp space, warp storms out there, or there are alien empires that are just kind of, destroying anything that comes near them. There are innumerable reasons. Yeah. So with the Segmentum Obscurus, they're called the Halo Stars. With the Ultima Segmentum, at the bottom, kind of 2/3, you've got the Eastern Fringe. At the top, you've got the Ghoul Stars. So it's a horror show for humanity when they venture out into these spaces. So continuing to move clockwise, at the bottom underneath the Segmentum Solar, we've got the Segmentum Tempestus. really nothing of huge note there. There are some significant imperial bastions there. It's really where the seat of the kind of cult of emperor worship. The emperor is worshipped as a god. So there's a planet there called Ophelia 7, and that's a real as I say, bastion of faith. Yeah, it's a real planet. I don't know what you've heard. It does exist.
You fucking planet.
But really, this is where a lot of religious wars are kicked off. A lot of crusades. The kind of rhetoric for those crusades can be found within the Segmentum Tempestus. And at the bottom of that, again, bounded by something called the Veiled Region, the similar story right round the edge of the Imperium, where it's you've got the edge of known space, as it were. And after that, you've kind of got just the void of kind of intergalactic space. The final then is the Segmentum Pacificus, which is to the west, or as I like to say, left of the Segmentum Solar. And that's, it's largely, how would you describe it? It's largely like frontier territory. It's not really heavily populated in terms of imperial control over planets. It's still part of the Imperium. However, it's a Wild West, really, because everything is focused off north to the Eye of Terror, south the navel gazing of imperial religion, and east is really where the main kind of conflicts and wars are being carried out. Now, what I've just described there is the galaxy up to the 7th edition. There is an event called a Black Crusade, and it's the 13th Black Crusade, done by the forces of evil that were beaten back during the Horus Heresy. So these are things that have been planned for 10,000 years.
Unlike this episode.
At the end
And they still had technical difficulties, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they had a lot of time to sort them out, didn't they? If we had 10,000 years, do you think this episode would have started better?
No.
I think in 10,000 years, this episode won't even be finished yet.
So at the end of 7th edition, there was this huge Black Crusade, the 13th in number, led by the kind of second in command of the arch traitor Horus, after whom the Horus Heresy is named after. And there's no record of what actually happened, but the galaxy split in two. They brought about a warp storm of such magnitude that it tore the galaxy in half, diagonally from the Eye of Terror in the top left down to the kind of the bottom third of the Ultima Segmentum in the bottom right. And so you have a section of warp space bisecting the entire galaxy.
Was that intentional?
Yes, it appears to have been intentional. So I described that the Eye of Terror was the original home empire of the Eldar. So once those planets were sucked into the warp, they turned into what's called demon worlds, which are just, it's hell. It effectively, they are different flavors of hell.
But still within corporeal space?
Well, within a kind of an overlap. You can travel there. The planet still exists where they had existed in the real world or in the kind of corporeal reality, but they were awash with the warp. So it was a mix. So it's really bad.
Half in, half out.
Half in, half out. That was limited really to the Eye of Terror and to maybe a handful of other sections within the galaxy, but on these sections maybe contained one or at most two worlds. What you have now is hundreds, perhaps thousands of planets across the entire galaxy have been absorbed into the warp. They've been drawn in, and the galaxy has been split in two. So what you have now, the kind of bottom right half, you're looking at something called Imperium Sanctus. So this is where the Imperium Solar still exists, the Tempestus, and Pacificus, so south and west still exist, but are rent with large areas of warp storms. So lots of planets have been sucked in. It cut the Ultima Segmentum almost cleanly in half, the largest section. And I should say at this stage, listeners, those of you whose noses are bleeding, maps will be provided.
To mop up the blood.
You then have this huge, to mop up the blood. You then have this huge wall of warp that separates the kind of Imperium Sanctus from what's called the Imperium Nihilis. So the Dark Imperium, as it's referred to. It's called the Dark Imperium because the light of the Astronomicon, that thing that's crucial for navigators to navigate the warp safely, cannot be seen. It's obscured behind this kind of galactic-sized warp storm.
Wow.
Let me guess. It is an area rife with Nell-dwellers towards the Imperium. Lots of black market trading goes on there and stuff like that behind the Imperium's back because they can't see into it.
I suppose yes, but that's true of anywhere near the fringes of the Imperium and their various Segmentae. What you're really looking at is there are now it's just demon worlds. It's hell. It's a strip of hell right through the galaxy that absorbs and spat out some planets, but also has transformed the galaxy into hell. So you've got a vastly reduced kind of operational Imperium. You've got then a kind of, it's referred to as the Dark Imperium. It's what happens when the organizational principle and the organizational bureaucracy of a vast empire collapses. It's the post-apocalyptic Imperium of Man. Wow. So,
is that only through that strip, or is it across the other half, the opposite side from where the true Imperium is?
Yeah, have you kind of got like east and west Milky Way now, and they both operate very differently?
Or is it just the gash that you described?
Please don't use the word gash.
Was it the Nagash? The
Nagash? No, if you can imagine, if you broke a dinner plate in two cleanly, and then use I've forgotten the name of the Japanese craft that's used to repair things with gold.
Oh yeah,
so use gold strip down the middle. So the bottom half of the plate is good. The top half of the plate is somewhat ironically the other half of the plate, but there's this strip in the middle, which is, in this analogy, that strip is hell.
Right.
That strip is warp space is broken through.
But the other half of the plate, what's the deal there? Is that hell as well, or is it just a collapsed empire, collapsed Imperium?
It's a collapsed empire. I mean, people didn't just kind of throw themselves down and cry. There's constant warfare. They're not being, the reinforcements aren't as coming as readily. They are coming. There are a few kind of traversable areas, but they are, in a constant state of war. Right. But the big thing is the astronomical. They're a lot more vulnerable
now. They don't have the support and the backup. Right, I see. Yeah.
Warp travel is incredibly dangerous, but not impossible through the various established routes. But a lot more ships are going missing. A lot more ships are arriving later or earlier. Communication.
A lot more tutting going on.
Yeah.
You're late.
In my day.
Was it Maltesers you wanted? I just left for the shops 2 minutes ago.
It's the level of communication. The established methods of communication no longer really work in the Dark Imperium. They do work locally, but there's not really any way of getting a cohesive message, a long-form message through to Terra or the various forces they're in. So,
can they travel through the Ganache?
There are only a couple of places of truly safe travel, but this is on a sliding scale. We're talking about traveling through war zones. You can travel through the warp, but
don't.
The warp's butt. No, thank you.
You can travel through the warp, comma, but it's very. I was about to say. I was about to say you can travel through the warp, but you can't. You can't, and other amusing punctuation, so that you can. Your odds are not great because the primary enemies you would face within these warp spaces are demons, like literal demons, and so they can assail your ships in a much more straightforward fashion, even at regular sublight, without dipping into the warp because of the crossover. Mr. Chris.
Wow. Was this the intention of the Black Crusade?
It is believed to have been the intention of that Black Crusade, yes, but it's unknown. It's explicitly not discussed.
Okay. So the Black Crusade do not like the Imperium of Man. Boo.
The Black Crusades are organized by the forces of chaos, led by a character called Abaddon, who was the second in command of
the Despoiler?
Horus. Abaddon the Despoiler, absolutely.
Chris.
Right.
Did you take notes?
No, I call shenanigans. He's been learning off book.
I call shenanigans as well. I don't think that we've even discussed any spoilage.
Dude, that little nugget of knowledge that I just regurgitated, I'm now going to have a stroke as a consequence. So I'm done.
Chris, your other nostrils bleeding.
Worth it.
And you've grown a second nose.
Yeah.
Bang.
Is that third eye?
So, yes, so the galaxy, really, it's a shit show. It's just an absolute roiling mess of hellscapes and warfare. Perfect for a tabletop game. Mr. Chris.
So, right, 13th Black Crusade split the galaxy, the Milky Way, diagonally in half.
Fruit chopped it.
Is the Milky Way, although it's got this big scar or ganache through the middle of it now, is it still one galaxy and rotating and operating in the same kind of singular manner? Do you know what I mean?
The short answer is yes. The laws of physics around all these demon worlds and warp storms are, the polite way to say it is suspended. Interstellar rain of giant frogs is nothing to these guys. They're used to it. It's just
sure.
Deal. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just an inconvenience these days. So the Milky Way hasn't been split into Milky Way Part 1 and 2 now. They're not two separate entities. The Milky Way as one still exists. There's just a big old galactic cut through the middle. That's all.
Yes, physically it's still one galaxy, but that galaxy now includes a huge rent right through the middle of it, as diagonally from top left to bottom right. But the Imperium of Man has been, and I love this phrase, cleft in twain.
I knew you were going to say cleft in twain. You love that phrase. Have you got a cleft in twain t-shirt? I feel like you should have that on a t-shirt.
Be on his tombstone.
It's on his tombstone.
It'll be on both my tombstones.
Yeah, it only works if he's actually cleft in twain.
He's one giant cleft tattooed on one knuckle and twain on the other.
I could just see it now. He gets attacked by some sort of samurai and cut into three, and he's lying there looking at the other two parts of his body. He's like, "But this isn't twain."
How do we cleft?
It could be worse. I could be cleft by Twain, which is cleft as a samurai dressed as Mark Twain.
Come cruise with us, citizen of the Imperium, on Supremacy Pilgrimage's Galactic Cruise Holidays. Find your own frontier on our state-approved package options. Experience adventure within the lush green jungles of Catachan. Take a dip in the clear blue waters of Malmar. Go zorbing over the dunes of Irock. Or simply gaze in awe at galactic wonders as we glide in relative safety through the warp, enjoying all of the Imperium-endorsed entertainment aboard our flagship vessel, Hammer of Xenos. Representing the very latest in oppressive luxury, Hammer of Xenos boasts not one, not two, but 3 designated canteens, all recipients of the coveted Inquisitor's Golden Spoon Award. And you'll always be well rested in our choice of bunks to suit your budget. Share your quarters with 1,000, 500, or just 200 other fellow citizens. Book now and take advantage of our no return, no fee promotion. And if you don't make it back, you'll get a full, no quibble, 100% refund. Supremacy Pilgrimage's Galactic Cruise Holidays. It's the only choice you have.
So that is the state of the kind of physical galaxy of the Imperium. It is a roiling mess. And
you could have just said it was fucked from the beginning. Yeah.
well, I mean that, but then the episode would only have been like 2 minutes long or 2 hours long, depending on how we edit.
Yeah.
I thought it might be useful just to kind of run through some of the planets or types of planets that exist within the Imperium. This kind of give you an idea of kind of bureaucratically how these things are assigned, and also what types of planets are there to give you a kind of idea of the different technology levels and the different kind of organizational levels that exist. Each planet can have more than one kind of designation. So you have the kind of biome style planets. So these are planets that are all of one thing. Like they're all desert, like, Dune. Or Arrakis, sorry, in the Dune series. So planets that are all one type of biome. So the most famous desert world in 40K is called Talarn. That's where a kind of elite unit of, or elite regiments of the Imperial Guard are raised. And this highlights a kind of organizational doctrine that there are so many different biomes that wars are fought in, that there are specialized regiments used to fighting in deserts, so raised from desert worlds or raised from ice worlds, like Valhalla. So these are another kind of famous world that regiments of troops used to fighting in frozen tundra, frozen planet conditions are raised. You then go through all of the normal kind of the word that struck me straight away was arboreal, and I don't know why. So you've got like jungle worlds and ocean worlds and kind of temperate worlds and other types of biomes.
If they arrived at a planet to take it over and discovered that it's a jungle planet, but they're like, oh shit, we're desert dudes, would they like not go on that planet and call it and be like, hello, is that jungle man?
Oh, we
Can you come in?
We don't swing this way.
Yeah, we don't quite literally.
We don't do trees.
We need a jungle swinger. Can you send jungle man, please? And then they have to wait for those guys to turn up. Or would they just be like, fuck it, guys, let's leave our tan fatigues on the floor, paint ourselves green, and get down there, cause some mayhem?
It's a good question. Most planets are discovered by these rogue traders, and rogue traders will have small detachments of various Imperial Army, Imperial Guard, or Space Marines attached. Now, Space Marines will fight in any conditions, so whatever the planet looks like is irrelevant. They may have
slightly windy,
slightly
gusty, a bit blowy.
Yeah.
When it's a fine rain, like just
fine sideways rain. Ugh, that's the worst.
They're British. Yeah. They won't fight unless it's just, not too hot, not too cold, light drizzle.
The thing to keep in mind, dear listeners, these regiments that are taken as a kind of regiments of Imperial Guard, each one of these soldiers is better than any soldier we have on planet Earth right now. So these are the elite of the elite. our armies would be considered a planetary defense force, which is what each imperial governor, each ruler of a planet, is required to have a force at arms to be able to defend his planet from threats without and within. Only the best of those units received further training and, in some cases, modification to become Imperial Guard worthy regiments.
Wow,
I mean, each one of these soldiers is, Rambo times 10.
Wow.
And amusingly, there is a Rambo figure within the Imperial Guard called Marbo, and he is Rambo. And he is quite literally a one-man army. He's the Chuck
cool.
Norris of space.
That's amazing.
And he does have a miniature. But,
what's he called?
Marbo.
Marbo.
It's just Rambo mixed up.
Marbo.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So these units, so a regiment raised from a desert planet would still fuck up pretty much anything on a jungle world. But they are slightly better. As good as they are slightly better when fighting within their kind of chosen milieu, or the training they received, or the planet they grew up in, the thing they're used to. So it's a more of an advantage. So biomes can play a big deal in the kind of classification of planets. But I thought, in terms of kind of generic classifications, really we start with feral worlds. These are worlds that, from our perspective, would be no more advanced than the Iron Age. And in general, their population is about 4 or 5 million. Yeah, just 4. So there's 4 people.
Probably as well organized as this
Krell,
podcast.
Darren, Ben, and Frodo.
Yeah.
4 or 5 million people on this planet. Now, these are like a lot of Space Marine chapters, which is the organizational term for a discrete kind of Space Marine army. They recruit heavily from feral worlds, because these are the ones where everything is a fight for survival. Space Marines tend to recruit around about the age of 11 or 10. Or sorry, I went backwards there. Around about 11 or 12.
You just went through the space warp then.
The space warp. I've warp spaced my own reference. And so that's because a lot of the surgery and implants that go into making a Space Marine have to be done pre or during puberty. So the body is awash with all these chemicals that turn them into these super warriors. But to do that, they need it to be on an extremely strong frame. And in general, the populace of feral worlds, because there's this constant fight for survival, are the kind of strongest raw materials
makes sense.
Available to them. The next step up then is feudal worlds. And this kind of touches on 2 things here. So feudal, we're looking at pre-industrial revolution in terms of technology. And you're somewhere around about 500 million people on the planet. So there's been an advanced civilization, and in quotes, exists. There are not on any of these kind of world-spanning cultures. It's all, as we are now, it would be individual countries or states. So there's a great deal of feudal worlds. It underpins the kind of the feudalism of the Imperium. Everything is nobility and aristocracy. That is how the Imperium is ruled. From planetary governors, who are the kind of those pet imperial citizens put into position to govern a planet in the Imperium's name and to meet the constant tides. So each planet has to produce a certain amount of something to satisfy a taxation requirement. So in feral worlds, this is going to be people. In general, it's going to be the toughest and strongest. In feudal worlds, it will also be the toughest and strongest, but they also have to produce raw materials like, coal or ore, or. And these then are taken off and processed on various other facilities to keep the bureaucracy and mechanism of war going within the Imperium of Man. We touched there on your question, Ben, about coming across a new world. These worlds actually have a name. They're called frontier worlds. Discovered either by the rogue traders or by fleets of explorers, or as they refer to them, explorators of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And these are the kind of machine priests of the Imperium. It'll give you an idea of how they operate. Their equivalent to an engineer is an engine seer. So there's a mysticism associated with technology within the Imperium. But yes, there are frontiers world all around, and let me use this phrase, the frontier of the Imperium of Man.
Aptly named.
Just a quick question. Would the fated planet in Warhammer Fantasy be classed as a feudal world by 40k standards?
100%.
Cool.
And listeners will recall that in episode 1 we touched on, there's a single paragraph in the Chaos Codex for the 2nd edition under the entry for a demon named Nakari, who appears both in 40k lore and in fantasy lore. And it's a throwaway comment about there being a planet where the kind of forces of good have constantly fought off chaos and Nakari as well. And that is really the only idea of the Warhammer, the planet of referred to as the fated place in Warhammer Fantasy, being a planet within the Imperium of Man. So yes, it would be.
I like to think there's lots of Warhammer Fantasy worlds with their own shit going down. I think that's a cool concept.
I think given the kind of the racial diaspora of humanity and the concept of abhumans, which are humans who have developed over thousands of years, or cultures that have developed over thousands of years on like high gravity planets or low gravity planets. Squats, Ogrins. You've got beastmen or bestial abhumans. So these are mixtures of people and usually goats. So moving on, we're looking now, the next kind of jump up are civilized worlds. This would be the kind of base entry level for this is our own world as it stands now. And then worlds perhaps with another couple of thousands of years of development in terms of society and technology. And really they've been allowed to progress without any kind of specialization outside of what kind of biome they might have. At this stage, still, a lot of these worlds don't know that any other world exists. In terms of like feral worlds, feudal worlds, frontier worlds, and civilized worlds, there is a level of nobility within each planet that will realize that this galactically spanning empire exists and deals with the kind of bureaucratic entities of these of this imperium. But in general, day-to-day citizens, they don't really know anything about the Imperium. Some do, but that knowledge has been seeded in either by the Adeptus Terra, so the kind of bureaucratic bean counters, or by the ecclesiarchy, which is the kind of church of the Imperium. But it's not done in any kind of real heavy-handed way. It's kind of fed in, they kind of suborn the myths and legends of various cultures on each world, and kind of steer it towards an eventual understanding that you worship this god, but in fact, what you were worshipping was the Emperor of Man.
Interesting. So they're kind of like the fish in the pond kind of thing.
Exactly
like
right.
There is the pond, nothing outside the pond. The pond is the only thing that exists, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
You do have on a number of these kind of civilized worlds, in quotes, there's a secondary classification where some of them are referred to as night worlds. And a lot of these are found within the Segmentum Solar, within that initial sphere of expansion of humanity, with these generational craft. We touched on something called the Standard Template Construct, the STC, which is kind of the WikiHow of colonies. So it's a nuclear powered 3D printing engine that allows you to take plans for everything you would ever need when setting up a new kind of planetary culture, and allows you then to create it, the facilities to create it.
Civilization starter kit. Yeah, love it.
Exactly right. So these night worlds, what they've done is they've taken the kind of agricultural robots, agricultural walking tanks, or walking tractors as they originally were, that guided these huge herds of livestock around the place. These evolved to become kitted out with more and more advanced weapons until eventually you had what's referred to as the Knights, hence Night Worlds. So these are huge combat walkers, usually armed with a fairly large bore cannon and an enormous chainsaw, which is referred to as a chainsword. And these now are used in defense, but they are treated historically, or so they're treated culturally as knights would be from our own kind of medieval period. These are the nobility.
Cool.
These are always the ruling class. And so some of these are, or most of these are on civilized worlds, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are on feudal worlds or various other types of worlds that we'll cover.
And these are just manned mecha. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly right. Mecha. Yeah.
But they used to be agricultural.
They used their original purpose and their original kind of iteration was a walking tractor.
That's so.
And then they grew a chainsaw and a big fucking gun.
Yeah.
Boom. Extreme.
It's just a really, really advanced scarecrow.
Yeah, a mechanized scarecrow. So I'm hoping you're seeing there's a kind of logical development from feral, so from feral to feudal to civilized. So what comes after civilized? Well, really you split off in kind of two directions. One is industrial. You get industrial worlds, which are planets that are focused to the production of a single thing, or a small handful of things, where the population lives and dies within factories, or factorums as they're called in 40K. But these are planets that are not under the control of the cult of the machine god. So they're not under the control of the Adeptus Mechanicus. So they don't produce hugely advanced pieces of equipment. They produce very basic things by the Imperium standard. So firearms, armor, this kind of day-to-day stuff within the Imperium. A lot of clothing, some food, some processing of food and goods. Anything that, takes in a resource, refines it and pumps out something else of relatively low technology is done on industrial worlds. The other way that civilized worlds kind of travel or evolve is to these things called hive worlds. Now, these are the archetypical planets that are shown within 40K lore. The two most famous really is Necromunda, which you may have heard of because it has its own game, kind of skirmishy game. But then you've also Why are you laughing?
I just love the name Necromunda.
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 It sounds like something the Turtles would say, doesn't it? Like, Necromunda, dude.
So the kind of defining characteristic of hive worlds are these hives. Now, these are cities that have grown. These are cities These are cities that have grown around the original core, which is the kind of the spacecraft that brought the original colonists there. So over time, you have this kind of conical monstrosity that grows up to 5 miles in height. So it's a man-made mountain of a city.
Shit.
You really get two types of hive worlds. So you get Necromunda is a great example because you have clusters of these hives dotted around the planet, and the planet has kind of been stripped bare of resources, and so it's kind of everything outside of the hive is kind of Mad Max style existence, and the life inside the hives is not that much better. It's very kind of claustrophobic and feudal. So where you live in the hive depends on what your social status is. So if you're a member of the nobility, you will live in either the outer skin, the outer layer of the hive, or at the very top. And if you're the lowest, you live within the core of the hive, maybe down even into what's referred to as the underhive. Because what you have to imagine is as the hive is expanding and growing and over thousands of years, the internal sections are rotting and collapsing. So really it's the kind of the honeycomb hideout of humanity within these hive structures.
Sounds fucking shit.
The way you were describing the planet Necromunda, it's very much like, is it the planet like Judge Dredd? Well, which is Earth, many hundreds of years from now, where you've got the megacities, a handful of megacities, and the rest is just bare, barren, desert basically around the world. Yeah,
exactly right. That's exactly what it appears to have been drawn from. In fact, because each one of these hives will contain a couple of billion people. And requires constant imports of foods and goods to keep everyone going. We will do an episode on Necromunda itself to describe what it's like living in there, but just in terms of purely of feeding.
Is it shit?
Well, now we don't need to do the episode. You've kind of summed it up. It's just shit. It's just shit.
You could fit all of China in one hive city. That is bananas. I wouldn't advise it. But you could.
You could. I mean, this again highlights your desperate need to. What would the word be? To concentrate specific cultures in areas. And we've talked to you about this before.
Whoa. These are baseless accusations.
So what you're saying, Darren, is China could be there, India could be there, and never shall they be cleft in twain.
Never shall they be cleft in twain. And what's amusing about that is that there is a hive in Necromunda that was cleft
called
in
India.
twain. And we will cover it when we cover Necromunda itself. But there are things called super hive worlds. And these really, for anyone who's a fan of Star Wars, it's Coruscant. It's where the entire surface of a planet and much of its kind of substructure, much of the kind of underground is turned into living space or factories or
urbanized.
Urbanized, that's the word.
Absolutely jam-packed. Yeah, okay.
Yes, but so the entire planet is just one city, and the biggest example of that is Terra, is our own home world, which no longer looks as the way as it does now. The seas have gone. There's no kind of green life outside of the gardens of the nobility. And everything is cities that are miles deep, completely around the crust. It's not self-sufficient. If it was cut off by a warp storm, it would descend into a kind of a horror show within hours. As hundreds of billions of people are now suddenly not able to feed themselves. I have forgotten something. I was going to say in Necromunda what the most common type of food is. It's referred to as corpse starch. So they take the bodies of people and process them down to the molecular level, and then recombine them into effectively Soylent Green. So
Wow.
the population of each hive, a significant portion of their diet is the dead of the planet, is the dead of their own hive. And there are, there are structures and organizations in place to make sure that type of food is constantly available, because what you don't want is a revolt of the billions working under you, because it will just devastate the hive that you're on. So anyway, moving on. So we touched on the kind of directions these planets go after being civilized. They go to industrial worlds or they go to hive worlds. We're then looking at, again, more specialized worlds after this. So you have mining worlds. Guess what happens there? They're usually...
Foosball.
Did you say miming?
Yeah,
Is that where
miming. Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of glass plates.
An entire planet populated by that lost French art. No, mining, as in digging. So these are entire worlds that are turned into strip mines. That all their resources are extracted. A lot of it is automated. There may be a garrison of a couple of 100,000 workers there and managers, but again, this is not under the auspices of the kind of the mystic machine cult with an L that is looking after the kind of higher tech. These are just planets used exclusively as raw materials. You then have the other half of that production process, or the other end of that production process. You have waste worlds. You have worlds that are literally landfills.
Wow.
So worlds that are given over to fly tipping, effectively galactic fly tipping.
I've never understood why, if you had the ability to do that, why wouldn't you just fire that shit into a star? Like, why wouldn't you just drop all of that into a sun or something?
Maybe they're big into recycling. As part of the fly tipping planet, you get teams of scavengers, and on the coast. Is it in like the South Asia where you get like the
you've seen
the
those
shipyard graveyard places, and they just tear them apart for all their like metals and things like that.
Are the waste planets populated?
They will have a kind of functional working populace there. But really, some of these are also used as prison planets. Like most of the mining worlds either are prisoners or are slaves who are producing this, the raw materials. On the waste worlds, the descendants of the original colonizers will be either mutated or out of favor or just forgotten. And so you will have, clans of rubbish warriors fighting for existence and domination.
Naff. Shaking their garbage sticks at them.
The top of a dustbin for a shield.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's you're looking at skirmishes amongst the kind of diaper planes of Oscar 4. This kind of thing. But it touches on your question touches on a good point, because these planets will have occupied that role for millennia. So you don't know what combination of what refuse is producing something beneficial. Like in Necromunda, there is a specific type of kind of food bar that was brought in during early colonization that, left alone, rots into this kind of dust that's renamed as spook, because it gives you this kind of hallucinogenic experience, but also bestows on you for a limited amount of time the abilities of a psyker. you're able to actually become a
Cool.
a psychic being, usually with bad results, but that only comes around because of an abandoned type of product. So one must assume in all these waste worlds there are something similar, or there's some lost piece of technology that was mistaken as rubbish and is thrown away. So these are good areas for kind of, what would you describe it? Galactic scrumping. Is that a thing? Do you think we can make that a thing?
Scavenging.
Yeah, that's
Scavenging. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of these really are worlds where life is hard. You know, it's a challenge to stay alive in a lot of these worlds, just amongst the populace and a little bit of the environment. You then get worlds which are referred to as death worlds.
They sound fun.
These are like biome worlds, like jungles or ice worlds, that are utterly inimical to human life, insofar as everything is trying to kill them all the time, simply because they exist. It's not happening because of a kind of malign intelligence. It's just simply the environment and the life there is so aggressive that it's just
death.
It's Darwinism made manifest on planets.
So is that, you mentioned that the feral planets were very good for recruiting from, because of the nature of it. Would death worlds be the same in that respect?
It's a great question. Death worlds are exactly the same. I'll give you two examples. One of the most elite jungle fighting units within the Imperium
it's not the Shaka Khans.
They are the Shaka Khans that came from a death world called Catachan. So it's the Catachan jungle fighters. They
the
are
Catachan jungle fighters, mate.
To give you an example, they every day have to hack back the jungle that is encroaching on them, and it's like it's as fast as bamboo grows. The jungle is constantly trying to spread into amongst the human settlements, and the life then is, the aggressive life forms are following that.
Wow.
And you have a thing called a Catachan devil, which looks like a cross between a giant millipede, a scorpion, and a son of a bitch. It's just
an absolute dick.
An absolute dick. So if you can survive to the age of 12 there, why wouldn't the Space Marines come and get you? And why wouldn't the Imperial Guard recruit whole regiments from there? These are the hardest of the hard, kind of
hardy hards.
Unaugmented humans in Imperium space.
Wow.
Another example would be the planet of Fenris, which is the kind of the home world of the Space Wolf chapter of Space Marines. So these are the Space Vikings. Fenris is an ice world. A lot of these death worlds are single biome worlds. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. So Fenris is also a feral. It's actually on the cusp of feral and feudal. There are actually quite a few tribes of effectively Vikings on this planet, constantly at war with each other and with the kind of archetypal kind of wolf bear pig kind of monsters from mythic Norse lore. So they have to deal when they're traveling across the seas. You have to deal with kind of krakens, squids, giant goldfish, this kind of deal. You then have to, on land, you're dealing with Fenrisian wolves, which are wolves the size of shire horses. And indeed, there's a unit the Space Wolves can field, which are Space Marines riding giant angry wolves as mounts, not as sexual partners.
Thanks for clarifying.
I'm glad you did.
So you then have what's called forbidden worlds. So these are worlds that have been quarantined, usually done by the Inquisition, usually done by this mystical Illuminati of Imperium. The Inquisition are able to, individual inquisitors are able to sentence anyone up to the entire populace of a planet to death if they're seen to be heretically turning against the Empire. So a lot of these forbidden worlds hold information that the wider Imperium should never learn or should not learn. A lot of death worlds are forbidden worlds. A lot of the remains of dead alien civilizations are forbidden planets, as are almost all demon worlds where the warp has broken through. So these are for your own good. We've decided you shouldn't know about these planets. So a lot of them are removed from the Galactic Gazetteer, much like I've forgotten the name. Is it Camino, the planet from one of the Star Wars movies, where it was removed from all records? So don't look here. Nothing to see here in terms of
Sure.
a kind of a planet.
Would it be? Would they like? Could they find like a virus, like a killer virus or something, like a biological threat that like Planet COVID?
I mean, what were they thinking? It had the name. Why would you go there?
yeah, exactly.
I've got a vision of these enormous destroyers in StarCraft turning up with huge masks wrapped around the front of them.
And what look like pregnancy test kits.
We then have, we've described these kind of horror shows, but then you've got what's referred to as pleasure worlds. And these are...
Hey, now we're talking.
They're planets of...
Top shelf worlds.
Top shelf worlds.
It's basically a world that is, you can't see the bottom 2/3 of it because it's got that kind of like silver cover. You just see the top.
That's
strip. Top shelf.
Yeah.
I know way too much about that.
I know way too much about 90s porn being sold in corner shops.
Being sold in garages.
I don't know what you're referring to. We'll draw a veil and move on. But these are planets that have, outstanding natural beauty. So it's kind of intellectually pleasurable worlds. And these are where...
That's disappointing.
Where like the nobles, the real kind of the kind of true powers within the Imperium, go off and have a break or retire to, or operate as their kind of base of operation for their kind of sphere of influence. So they're really, it's a civilized world, but it's geared towards the kind of the various forms of pleasure that the nobility indulge in, and we all know none of them are ever shady or suspicious.
Excellent.
Sure thing. Being a whole world, can they accommodate more than just one noble family? Surely, like they can be populated by several hundred, if not millions of people, and they're not going to encounter each other. They're still going to have private moments, or literally, it's like, is it that inefficient? Like, one noble person gets a whole planet to himself.
I suspect there are examples where one person owns the planet. So I'm thinking of like a rogue trader, or one of the kind of high ecclesiarch bishops of the faith of the emperor will effectively own a single planet and may invite their friends over for a good time. But most of them would be, it's really like exclusive hotel planet is really what we're looking at.
Sure.
So some of them invite people in or are used as rewards for good behavior for the powerful that are doing the good work of the even more powerful. Speaking of the ecclesiarchy, they really have kind of three types of worlds, and we'll kind of whip through them here. The kind of largest centers of religious influence are what's referred to as the cardinal worlds. And as with hive planets, as with hive worlds, so too with cardinal worlds, somewhat to a lesser extent, but these are ones that are just covered in temples and cathedrals and sanctuaries and shrines. And so it's a single church planet, as it were. There's constant worship going on, but also the administration of large sections of space in terms of the works of the ecclesiarchy. These are the influence kind of spider webs out to what's called shrine worlds, which are the kind of lesser version of cardinal worlds. So a lot of feudal and feral and civilized planets or civilized worlds are shrine worlds, where there's quite an influence put on by the kind of church of the emperor. The kind of final one they have real are what's referred to as cemetery worlds. So that's where an entire planet is a cemetery. It's just filled with mausoleums, sepulchres, and maybe the occasional shrine or church. And it's where the great and the good are sent to be buried. A lot of moons are in fact cemetery worlds, where you have that's where the population of the main planet, if they're worthy enough, are buried, are interred in these cemetery worlds. So it's really, you're seeing gross specialization. Speaking of specialization, we talked about the kind of machine cults, the Adeptus Mechanicus. These are the kind of mystical technology priests, and they're really their kind of planet of choice is what is referred to as a forge world. So these are industrial worlds on whatever drug makes things more industrious. Speed, I don't know. So as the super hive worlds are to hive worlds, forge worlds are to industrial worlds. It's an entire planet is simply one large factory producing really high-tech goods. Everything from land speeders, kind of hovercraft style vehicles, up to and including starships.
Air fryers.
Yeah, air fryers. An interesting part about these forge worlds is that two things really. One is a lot of them will have night worlds associated with them. So the knights are really split into those that are loyal to the Imperium or loyal to the Adeptus Mechanicus. That loyalty highlights the other aspect of Forge Worlds, is they are of the Imperium, but not part of the Imperium. They are allied sections of space considered to be under the banner of the Imperium of Man, but operationally exclusively under the kind of leadership of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And the home world of that, their version of Terra, is the planet Mars. So all of these planets are, do you know the intro to the original Blade Runner? It's that. That's what they look like. And so, ringed by shipyards for building starships and space stations, and. These are the beating heart of technology within the Imperium. It should also be said, there are no unaugmented adult humans on these Forge Worlds. They are, for those
everyone's
who
had a bit of aftermarket treatment.
Yeah,
spoilers. Low suspension.
It's a little bit Borgy.
Okay, yeah.
It's a little bit Borg-like.
One glowing green eye which like focuses all the time.
Yeah. And so what's produced by these Forge Worlds then almost exclusively feeds into the mechanism of war. So you have, in terms of other planets, you have these war worlds. These are effectively just war zones. And these are names that are applied to areas of space as wars and large campaigns go on. You then have, backing these up, you have both fortress worlds. So imagine a space castle that is a planet. That's effectively it. Is it Cheyenne Mountain in the States? Where they've hollowed out this mountain and they have all the kind of military set up under there.
Oh yeah,
that on a global scale. Now, there is this is where it gets a bit schizophrenic, because in the Dark Imperium, on the other side of the evil warp wall, you have the same thing, but they're referred to as Sentinel worlds. But they're not only fortress worlds, but they're also kind of cultural repositories. You know, they keep the kind of spirit of the Imperium going within kind of local space around them. So it's their kind of the holdover of the Imperium structure in the Dark Imperium is centered on these Sentinel worlds. You then have, of course, armor. I'm saying, of course. How would you know? You then have what's referred to as armory worlds. Now, these are effectively just magazine worlds. These are worlds exclusively dedicated to storing weapons, ammunitions, and vehicles and larger war machines to be used as like a weapons cache in case war breaks out. So these are dotted all around the Imperium. And really, in terms of the Imperium of Man, those are the broad categories of planets. I would like to touch on two kind of final planets for the Imperium. One is the kind of homeworlds of Space Marine chapters. Space Marine forces break into two groups. One is fleet-based, one is world-based. If you're world-based, you're also in charge of an area of the Imperium surrounding your homeworld.
Like Ultramar.
Yes, exactly like that. And indeed, like Fenris as well. Fenris has a sphere of influence around it that the Space Wolves enforce. In general, these homeworlds are feral or feudal. Some of them are death worlds as well. Some of them are single or multi-biome. So it's really, it's a strategic area of dominance that the Imperium wants to reinforce with a dedicated Space Marine presence. But that presence, that, you know, the Space Marines have to get something out of it as well, and almost exclusively that's recruitment rights to the worlds around them, so they can constantly replenish their numbers. The final Imperial world I want to touch on answers the question, how the fuck are you going to feed all these people? And these are referred to as the agri-worlds. They're not originally
worlds.
as
Munchy worlds. Munchies worlds.
Munchies worlds. They are basically farms the size of planets. These are staffed by a kind of small, maybe tens of thousands of kind of administrative staff, but also hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of specially adapted human slaves, referred to as servitors. These are humans usually done as a penalty, sometimes done as a reward, where you're lobotomized and your limbs are replaced so that you can fulfill a specific task. With agri worlds, it's going to be harvesting. So you have
massive scythes for arms.
Yeah. Or huge chain blades, and so there's a constant seasonal growth and harvesting. All the food is then packed up and put aside next to a spaceport. There may be one or more spaceports, and there's just a continuous stream of food coming out of these agri worlds and feeding. Forge and Hive worlds also going to war worlds and bastion worlds, just to keep those planets that are not self-sustaining alive. And really, that is arguably the weakest point in the Imperium. If you were to start destroying agri worlds, a lot of these planets would just self-destruct, collapse, culturally, perhaps even literally.
Are they heavily guarded then, these agri worlds?
Almost exclusively not.
Wow.
Some of them are hidden, some of them are forbidden, but a lot of them, they will have a defensive force, but they will be nearby, like a fortress world, if you see what I mean. There is a presence available for defense, but not on planet. They might have a few regiments, but the larger
people with pitchforks for arms. Yeah. Get off my land.
But you won't have the larger kind of logistical vehicles. War
Seems
machines,
like
that kind of idea.
a hole in the design there. It's like the Death Star. You don't have any handrails around these massive fucking rooms where you could just fall over. Do you know what I mean? Like, put in a handrail. You know? Put in some guards. Put in some patrols around these agri worlds. Jesus.
So from the Imperium's perspective, those are the kind of, that covers the vast majority of planets under their kind of million planet empire. There are other planets out there. There are non-human planets referred to as Xenos planets. Now, these are going to be planets that are controlled by a single alien species, which is, as I've just mentioned, referred to as the Xenos by humankind. So these are going to be planets that are, under the control of orcs, under the control of the Tau. So a single culture dominates that planet, either as a full occupation or homeworld, or as a colony. The Eldar would be a good example of this because they had previously a galaxy-spanning empire that was destroyed due to the fall of the Eldar. So, as I've mentioned, their homeworlds are within the Eye of Terror, their original homeworlds, and those are referred to as the Crone worlds. So these Crone worlds are actually also what's referred to as demon worlds, which we've touched on. These are the worlds that have crossed over or mixed with the power of the warp. The Eldar saw this issue coming. They saw their own collapse coming. It was kind of writ large on the wall. So what they did is they seeded existing planets, referred to as dead worlds. These are it would be like our moon. So it's worlds that have no atmosphere, no life form, nothing. And began the process of terraforming these into kind of, almost like paradise worlds. These are ecstatically beautiful planets where every view is more spectacular than the last, and it just gets a bit dull after a while. But this is where they were going to reestablish the Eldar race. These maiden worlds, as they're referred to, still exist, but they're all around the kind of fringe of the Imperium of Man, as humanity has colonized a lot of them. The only other world worth mentioning, or the only other type of world worth mentioning right now, are the tomb worlds of the Necrons. There's no specific type of tomb world. As we'll discover as we go through, history predates humanity by millions upon millions of years. And so around about the time the dinosaurs were wiped out, the Necrons as a race, as a faction, went into kind of robotic hibernation beneath the surface of these worlds that used to be their own empire. And over time, these have evolved into the various different types of worlds that we've covered here. And thus, now that the Necrons are reawakening, they're starting to emerge up through into feudal worlds and ice planets and desert planets and, in some cases, hive worlds or agri worlds.
Does that then override the previous categorization? Does a death world that they've woken up on now become a tomb world?
Tomb world really is how the Necrons refer to the planets they are on.
Right.
And to some extent, there's an Inquisition and tag that is the tomb worlds as well. So I suppose the short answer is yes. But that tag, that definition, is really only applied by the kind of ultra secretive Inquisition, because a lot of tomb worlds, as they are uncovered, are instantly categorized also as forbidden, to kind of keep the knowledge of this race out of the kind of general populace of the Imperium. So really, now what we've done is we've done an episode crammed full of even more information than the Additions episode that we swore we wouldn't replicate. You're welcome.
Yes.
You are welcome.
Have. And if anyone is still listening by this point, well done. Well done.
So, lads, thoughts on the galaxy at large?
It's fucked.
Incredible. all that I'm reminded of is I was kind of forewarned that the 40k universe is fucking huge. Like,
Oh yeah,
and
it's enormous.
And there's a
this
lot of
highlights
stuff
it.
going on.
Not only that, it's it's not just lore. For example, our fantasy Warhammer podcast. It's not just that scaled up, is it? It's not just
No.
like, oh, you've got factions spread out. It's like you've got hundreds of thousands of billions of worlds, which are divided into hundreds of thousands of billions of subplanets, which have hundreds of thousands of billions of sub-politics, and make it. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
it is
Brain
absolutely
melting.
vast. Yeah,
Right,
man.
so
yeah.
Kral, pleasure worlds
Go.
aside, if you had to live on one of those worlds, where would you live?
You know what? I was thinking about the agri world, kind of like, because I'm a bit of a country bumpkin. Me and Amy love our rural life. You know what I mean? And I can imagine myself, I just like foresee these kinds of nice, stunning, endless prairies, blue skies, me smoking my corncob pipe full of whatever I'm smoking that day. Just out there tilling the fields, tending to my cattle, lobotomized, don't have a care in the world.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to struggle to hold that pipe with scythe arms.
I'll figure out a way.
Maybe together, just pin it.
So a question about the agri-worlds. I'd like, these guys are lobotomized. They're pretty much mindless workers, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, it's not a quaint country life as an agri-world farmer, I should say.
No, the only ones that really any kind of agency or sense of self are the kind of managerial, organizational, administrative, and other things that mean the same thing types that are on, like the overseers. And that's still a pretty hard life because these servitors break down, both physically and emotionally, some would suspect.
Yeah, right.
It's one of these things that's kind of missed as people read about the lore. Everything is incredibly ritualistic.
Right.
There are prayers, several times a day. There's high holidays. Every action is a form of prayer to the kind of as a psychic bandage for the emperor.
It's fanatical.
Do they have Emperor Day?
There's the Ascension Day, which is that's the day that the emperor ascended to the Golden Throne,
right.
Where at the end of the Horus Heresy, where his physical form was effectively put into life support, and is still there.
Wow, holy shit!
In a museum that people can pay 50p to go see.
Yeah. And they'll have those machines where you put the penny in, and then you press the thing, and it squishes it into a kind of a long penny.
Yeah, and they have the souvenir shop at the end. I was at the Emperor's place today. T-shirt and mug. And
What planet would you live on, Dhar? No pleasure planet is not allowed.
No pleasure planet at all. I think I'd like to live on a feudal knight's world.
Oh, yeah.
And just go LARPing every day.
Yeah.
And you, Benny?
I think I'd live on a waste planet because it sounds pretty peaceful there, actually. I mean, it might stink and the landscape's pretty shit, but I don't think anybody's got any interest in that. I was just thinking about where would be the safest. Like, no one's going to attack a waste planet, are they? So fuck it, I'll stay there. Yeah. Agricultural, pleasure, it's all high targets.
You'd have to guarantee that the waste planet wasn't a tomb world and wasn't a maiden world for the Eldar, because you'd have Necrons coming up from the ground or Eldar warping in from the side to get rid of you.
I think that's a given. I mean, that's obviously what I meant. Like,
I mean, I'm researching it down. I'm researching. So I know that was an absolute syringe of information directly into your brain, but it's crucial for what we're going to be covering in the next few episodes to understand.
We're just warming up for the 7-hour marathon that's coming next week. Yeah. Got it.
In terms of romance, what we've done so far is light flirting.
Yeah, just you wait until the heavy petting.
Yeah. I'll show you my Eye of Terror.
Gross. Right, shall I wrap up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. Details and imagery for the topics we've discussed in this podcast can be found on our website at layingdownthelore.com. We also have all our previous episodes on there, release schedules, merchandise, and you can sign up for the Laying Down the Lore newsletter, which includes exclusive info about upcoming releases, behind-the-scenes chat, and some extra lore not covered in the podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard in this episode and want to support us, head over to patreon.com/layingdownthelore40k and sign up today for as little as £3. This will also give you access to our Discord server so you can come and tell us exactly what you think of us. We'll be back soon displaying just how little Chris and I know. Until then, cheerio.
See you later.
Ta-ta.